Here is a motion picture film. Let's tidy up this tangle of film by putting it on a reel.
Hello, listeners, and welcome to Film Swap. My name is David Seeley, and this young man across from me virtually is the ecstatic gaucho himself, who's about to throw down not a knife, not a dagger, but a film at my feet. And his name is Jonathan Pritchard Barrett. Jono, how are you doing?
Hi, I'm doing very well, thank you, David. Looking forward to discussing two utter classics tonight.
Yes, we've picked a couple of real all-time classic films to talk about tonight. The idea was originally, wasn't it, that we decided to today to do something slightly less formal, and actually rather than a theme, we just said, well, let's just talk about personal favorites. We'll just, Jonathan would put forward an all-time favorite film of his, and I would do likewise. But then once, of course, as it happens, we put the two films forward, and then a sort of a theme of sorts emerged, didn't it?
It did. It did emerge, and these two films have very distinct sort of thematic similarities.
Yeah, there's a current that runs through each of them. And of course, they are stylistically and everything very, very different. But there's a lot of interesting things to pick out of these films. So, Jonathan, do you want to just very briefly introduce the film that you put forward tonight?
The film that I put forward is called Performance. It was released in 1970. Although it was originally scheduled to come out in 1968, and it stars Mick Jagger and James Fox, one of the famous Fox family.
Yes, indeed. And my film tonight, I picked one of the all-time seminal classics of Japanese cinema, and it is called Ugetsu. And it is a film that came out in 1954, and it was directed by the great Kenji Mizoguchi, and one of the masters of cinema, not just Japanese cinema, but just cinema in general. And this is one of his it's one of his later works, one of his last films, and also widely regarded as one of the greatest films ever made. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. It sounds very grand when you say things like that. The greatest film ever made. But in actual fact, in this case, I think you could definitely make a pretty good argument for that. And perhaps we'll do that tonight. So listeners, from your point of view, we're just going to take a few seconds break. And then we're going to come back and talk about our first film, which is Ugetsu.
Thanks for listening to the Film Swap podcast. You can follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon, Audible, and Google Podcasts, or any of your favorite podcast catchers. If you like this podcast, please consider giving the show a rating or leaving a review. This helps other listeners find the show.
And we're back. Welcome back, listeners, and welcome back, Jonathan.
Hi.
Yeah. Have you got anything to say for yourself? Anything new and exciting you can share with the listeners?
New and exciting. Well, I have seen both these films, which I have seen them both before, but I haven't seen them for quite a long time. So that was a nice experience. It's always good to sort of revisiting a film, you haven't seen for a while, and sort of seeing it with sort of new eyes. And you're not just seeing the film, but you're seeing what you saw in the original, in the first or last time you saw it as well, which is an interesting sort of thing. And also been watching this BBC drama, The Sixth Commandment, all about this sort of basically serial killer guy, which is
What, a
really
TV
good.
show about serial killers? Who'd have
Well,
thought?
it's sort of. I mean, he wasn't really. He was only at the beginning of his career when he got stopped. But yeah, so it's good. It's a good drama.
Or was it like based on a real
It's
thing?
based on a real story.
Oh,
Yeah,
right. Okay.
this guy. Yeah. Anyway, but yeah, it's a sort of four-parter.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, good one.
Great. Would you say that that's worth checking out? Would you? Is that
I
something you'd
would say so. Yes,
recommend?
it's got Timothy Spall in it, the great Timothy
Oh, yeah,
Spall,
yeah. I like Timothy Spall.
and
Brilliant.
the main the sort of the murderer is this Irish actor who's sort of up and coming talent as well. Oh, his name unfortunately eludes me at the moment, but yeah, I would definitely recommend it.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll keep an eye out for that. That sounds interesting, and I'm sure maybe some of our listeners will as well.
Yep.
Brilliant. But tonight we're going to talk about a 1953 Japanese film called
Yes.
Ugetsu, or Ugetsu Monogatari. And I
Yeah.
apologize profusely to any Japanese listeners out there who might be shocked and appalled at my pronunciation. But
Cringing.
please, yes, exactly.
Going.
Please,
Oh.
yes, please forgive me and bear with me. I'll do my very best to talk about this great film. So yes, I said at the beginning it was 1954, but apparently it was 1953, so I was off a little bit there.
Yeah.
My apologies. But Ugetsu was one of the last films from Kenji Mizoguchi, who is one of the
Yes.
great grand masters of Japanese film, actually. When he
Yep.
made this, he was already considered one of the great grand masters who'd been making films for decades and had quite a reputation. Many of his films, there's common themes that run through his films. A lot of his films tend to be about downtrodden and families and things who are subject to, poverty and struggles and a lot of emphasis on women and women's place in society and the issues that women face in sort of a patriarchal society. He does a lot of sort of historical dramas and things, which includes this one.
Right.
The film is set during the Azuchi Momoyama period,
Yep.
which was a time when there was quite a bit of civil war in Japan. There was a
Yes.
lot of sort of feuding, different sort of warlords and different fiefdoms, if you will, that were fighting and warring back and forth.
Yep.
And this film very much uh, reflects on how these things impact just general farmers and just general poor people who are living in
Yep.
those times and having to contend with these constant back and forth of different marauding armies coming through their villages and the areas where they live and fighting back and forth.
Mm.
And the story uh, centers on two gentlemen who have aspirations, don't they, Jonathan,
They do.
to better their situation. They have kind of dreams of glory. One of them,
Yes. One of them's Genjuro. He's
yeah,
the sort of
Genjuro is the
main guy.
potter, isn't he? He's kind of the main
Yep.
protagonist of the piece,
Yep.
and then he has a neighbor um, who dreams of being a samurai. But of course, he has no
Yes.
formal training, and he has no wealth to buy, the equipment that are prerequisites for being a samurai. He and his friend decide to go into the local town to sell some pottery to
Yep.
raise money, and he quite feverishly is making pots, and he's and his wife and the other villagers keep saying to him, maybe don't worry so much about making all this money. Just let's just enjoy, have a good life, and maybe prepare ourselves a little bit for these warring
Mm.
factions that keep kind of coming through the area and sort of ransacking the villages and things. But these men are preoccupied with their dreams of kind of glory
Yes.
Wealth and status. So
Yeah.
off they go, and the film really becomes a tragic story about what happens to these two men and their families as a consequence of their decision making.
Yeah.
And the story is effectively kind of a ghost story, and it serves as a parable for men whose ambition and seeking wealth and fame and all these things, how it impacts their lives and the people in their lives. Genjiro meets a woman who sort of seduces and entices him away, and she's on the surface, she's a woman of wealth and privilege. She has a large property, and
Yeah.
she's a lady, and she comes to buy some of his pottery and things, and then sort of lures him to her home, where she kind of seduces him and sort of insists on him becoming her mate. So,
Yes.
and this then leads to tragedy for his wife and child, who he's left behind. Uh,
Yeah.
so this is the basic story. So,
Well, there's actually two stories because I think, basically it comes from a novel, doesn't it?
mm,
A 17th century novel called Ugetsu Monogatari, and that's the story of this lady Wakasa,
mm,
this the woman who lives in the manor house and sort of lures him up there. But then there's the other story, which is the subplot, which is his mate, who's desperate to become a samurai, and that's based on a Guy de Maupassant story called How He Got the Legion of Honor.
mm.
And so what happens to him? But
Yeah,
so I
they
think
do.
there's
They get separated through the course of the story, don't they? And
exactly,
the story
yeah,
splits off. And you're quite right that the two stories, they were based on. I think there's actually even a third story that formed part of the
yeah,
inspiration for the stories that are told in the film. Film is really trying to show the sort of the how these ambitions and these things that these men chase after. The spirit, the woman is, like I said, is essentially a ghost story, and she's
yeah,
essentially a spirit who is there to entice him away with all these promises of wealth and privilege and all these things. But it's ephemeral, isn't it? And it's not anything that he can grasp. And through the course of the story, we come to realize, as he does,
yeah,
that he's chasing, the wind, or a spirit, literally, in
yeah,
that sense.
yeah,
Um, and again, there's tragic results for the family. That is what's really why this film is such a great masterpiece, and why it has great resonance. I think even I think it has quite a lot of universal themes
yeah,
about men and how they kind of chase their tails for
yeah.
this thing, and perhaps lose sight of the things of value that are right in front of them. And I think it's
I think,
something that anyone can relate to.
yeah, it reminded me of Chaucer. It's almost like a sort of fable, basically.
Mm,
And so when I was at school, I did learnt the Pardoner's Tale in my English, and this is a story of these three men who are drinking, and I think this is the right name, and then they decide, because it's the time of the sort of the plague, and they decide death has been killing too many of their friends. Let's go and kill death. And so off they go, and they meet this old man on a sort of footpath, and they ask him, "Where do we find death?" And he says, "Oh, go over there." And they go over there and look under the tree that he's told them where they're going to find death. And there they sort of dig a hole, basically find some gold.
mm,
And then so one of them goes off to go and get some sort of a bag to take it away in or something. And when he's there, he thinks, "I know, I'll kill the others, so I'll get some poison." And when he's away, the other two think, "Oh, we'll kill him." And so
mm,
they get their knives out. So he gets there, they kill him. They drink the wine that he's brought, and they both die. And so the sort of the gold has led to their demise.
Right.
And it's a sort of similar fable of their sort of greed, essentially.
Yes.
And sort of
And
killing
they found
them off.
death.
Yeah, they have found death, exactly.
Yeah.
And it sort of slightly reminded me of this sort of the moral of this similar sort of thing. Their greed leading them into trouble.
And what do you think of the? Because I mean, the film is quite beautifully filmed, and I mean, I think again, without wanting to spoil the ending for anyone, the ending has an incredible, poignant sort of moment when the real tragedy of the man's fate is revealed at the end, isn't it? It's a very deeply affecting moment, and it's done with this simple sort of 360-degree pan around the house, and it's quite a deeply moving moment.
Yes, and it's got some very beautiful scenes. There's one where they're traveling across a lake, I mean a very shallow lake, but a lake in the mist, and somebody's singing, and it's a very sort of beautiful, very spooky, sort of supernatural scene. I really enjoyed that bit. Some great sort of dialogue. The finest silk may change and fade away.
Yes.
That down. I thought that
is that in the song that she sings when he first goes to the house?
Yeah, I think it might be. Yeah.
But then because the sound design is quite clever as well, because even when you have this really beautiful song and she's singing, but then in the background there are these really kind of creepy noises that are just sort of below the surface and sort of just creeping in slowly. And then she reveals that it's the spirit of her father who's there to comment on the
because the music is definitely spooky. Because whilst I was watching it, I left the door open, and Charlie, who's 9, came down and said, "What's that? What's that music? It's scaring me." So he was trying to get to sleep.
Oh dear!
And he could hear this sort of ethereal, sort of ghostly Japanese music, and I mean, it wasn't surprising that it was scaring him, because it was sort of meant to be scary. Yeah, it was. That is a good part of the film as well. The music, definitely quite spooky.
Masayuki Mori is kind of the main man.
Yeah.
Yes.
And he's sort of. I mean, he's a really terrific actor, isn't he? Really expressive, and he's sort of. Yeah, it's not sure. That's the nice thing at the beginning. So is he trying to take advantage of all this? Make his sort of fortune. When he's basically sort of cashing in on the war, essentially. But
there is an element of war profiteering, because I guess there's a lot of sort of refugees and a lot of soldiers and people who are amassing in this town. So there's a lot of customers and a lot of people who need new things, because maybe their house has been ransacked and destroyed by marauding sort of armies of soldiers and things.
Yeah.
So they need to replace their household
goods,
pots and dishes and things like that. So there is an element of opportunism that comes with his with his business pursuits.
Yeah, but first of all, it's not. You don't. Well, you think maybe he's being foolish and greedy, but maybe he's being sort of sensible and taking advantage of a situation whilst he can, and he's going to sort of take himself from utter penury into sort of something slightly more comfortable. And think, well, perhaps he's being sensible.
Yeah, I mean, you can make that argument, and I think the thing is, it's established that they're not wealthy people; they're poor farmers, and that they have to work quite hard in sort of a sustenance kind of lifestyle. So for them, yes, to take an opportunity. I mean, most people would if they, if anyone does when they see an
Yep.
opportunity
Yep.
to get ahead and to make money, they take it. And I
Yep.
guess it's a bit different from something like there's a scene where his neighbor who aspires to be a samurai, he gets a little
Yes.
bit of silver in his pocket from helping to sell the pottery, and he goes straight to buy weapons and all the
Yeah.
you know
Armor.
yeah, all the war paraphernalia. And I suppose there's a bit different between war profiteering and in the sense of feeding the violence, and there's a difference between just someone who's sees an opportunity to better their situation. I think
Yep.
there is probably a bit of a difference, but I think
Yep.
I guess the film makes the point that in war it unsettles people, and it does create these situations. And
Yep.
we have like there are scenes when his wife keeps saying, I'm just happy, for us to
Yes.
be here and to work together and raise our son and just be happy here.
Yep.
And I don't need all this wealth and chasing after this stuff. I would rather spend time with your family, because there's a certain
Yeah.
point where he becomes quite obsessive about making loads and loads of pottery and making, he's just working day and night and making piles and piles of this stuff.
Yep.
And but it shows that he's then starts kind of neglecting his son, and sort of being a bit terse and ornery with his wife, and sort of
Yeah.
saying, come
He's
on,
a
get on with it, because I
he's
need
a
to get this
workaholic,
done. Yes, he becomes a bit of a workaholic, and I think that isn't
basically.
something, because loads of people can say that happens in their, they want to do well for their families. They want
Yep.
to provide a good, comfortable living and have nice things. So people
Yep.
work really hard at their jobs, and they try and get ahead, and they try and get
Yep.
promotions, and they kind of focus on all this. But the downside to that, of course, is that that takes more and more of your time that you spend concentrating on that, and you're actually
Yep.
the focus has shifted away from your family. So I
Yes.
think that's a little bit of what the point of the film is making as well.
Yeah.
It's
And I
about getting your
guess,
priorities straight, I suppose.
yeah, and I think what Lady Wakasa is sort of is the embodiment of his desires in a way. She's
Mm.
the sort of she's like his sort of misplaced energies in sort of not quite physical form, but visual form anyway,
Mm.
isn't she? Because
Yeah,
yeah,
and
attractive but deadly.
yes, and she's kind of sucking the life force out of him, isn't he? Because isn't she?
Yeah.
Sorry, because through the course of the film, you can see he becomes more haggard and pale,
Yeah.
and sort of because she's kind of draining that from him, and he's getting older, and he
Yeah.
and I guess that's what she symbolizes, is the fact that she's this unobtainable thing, really, that he just feels driven, compelled to kind of chase and try and make happy, but all it's doing is draining him, and it's taking him away from his family and the
Yeah.
things that really matter to him. Uh,
Yeah.
and then in the end, kind of his wife becomes a spirit as well, but she's becomes more of a spirit that embodies, regret and the things that you lose, and the decisions that you've made, and how they,
Yes.
the things that you lost each time you make decision in life, because you maybe gain something, but you lose something as well.
Yes.
And I think that's why the film's so poignant, and it's quite a personal favorite of mine, because I think it really resonates with me about
Yeah.
that, about um, the looking back and kind of thinking about what might have been if I hadn't have
Right.
done that, and I had
Yeah.
taken that path. What did I lose when I went this way instead of going that way?
Yeah.
Those are all kind of universal themes that I think anyone, this film would resonate with anyone, I think.
That's true. That's
Yeah.
true. Yeah, it is. It's despite. I guess that's it. Despite being a sort of fable, it is something that sort of still can resonate with us
Yeah,
all in the modern age.
absolutely. And I think
And
therein lies its greatness, because it is perfectly sort of um, does that. It tells that story very effectively and beautifully,
yeah,
and it's kind of like really a perfect film from, beginning to end. How it takes you in
mm,
this circle, and it does it in a really affecting way. And it's got there's not a lot of humor in it, I must admit. It's not the guy,
no,
and in Mizoguchi's a lot of his films, there's not a lot of sort
right,
of there's a bit of joyful moments with his family and things at the beginning,
yeah,
but essentially this is a fable and a cautionary tale, and sort of a um, so I guess that is one thing I would say, is that it's not like there's not a lot of laughs here.
no,
It's more of a
no,
sort of a drama, and it's quite harrowing at times, and quite moving and poignant and powerful.
yeah.
Yeah,
One of the things that I really liked about it was, as you say, that circular story. So it sort of finishes off just where it started off,
yeah,
in the sort of same room and with the same people, to an
yeah,
extent. And his sort of what he's learned over the course of the going out and coming back again,
yeah.
over the
Both
course of the
both the
story.
chaps, both the samurai and the main guy as well. They've both gone on this journey and ended up back where they started, perhaps a little bit wiser,
Yeah,
and with some regrets and things um, that they can't kind of take back, but they have to kind of move on, move forward. So
yes. Well, I guess one of the other things that Lady Wakasa is almost like the lotus eater, the lotus eaters in Odysseus.
mm,
So they're sort of, or the sirens rather, sort of singing, and once you hear their beautiful song, you sort of fall into a trance, and you just
mm.
want to, well, sort of cast yourself on the rocks. Um, and so she's a sort of similar thing, hypnotic.
Yeah, and it's an amazing performance too. I mean, she's a really beautiful woman, but
Yeah.
also very eerie. And you almost, right from the get go, when you first see her, you kind of think, "Oh, there's something not quite right here."
Mm.
Even though she's very lovely, she's beautiful and stuff, but you immediately kind of go, something's not
Yeah.
quite right here.
Yes. So something sort of about the makeup. It looked there's sort of bits of sort of unusual bits of on her makeup that. Oh, I mean, it could have just been that sort of Japanese sort of style from that period,
Yeah, I don't know if
but I'm
that's
not
kind
sure.
of like a kabuki kind of thing, or that kind of, like the
There's a
with the
couple of spots
eyebrows
on
and
her
the.
forehead, like
Yeah, I mean,
round.
I must admit, I'm not
Not
as
sure.
as much of a sort of an expert on kind of Japanese culture as I'd like to be. I mean, I'm quite a sort of a, sort of an amateur, very amateur Japan-phile. So I love Japanese films and
Yeah.
Japanese stuff of all kinds, but I don't profess to be an expert on any of it. But I think a
No.
lot of that traditional, a lot of the makeup and the sort of some of the storytelling techniques are a bit more sort of traditional based. You see that kind of running through a lot of Japanese films of the period as well, the
Yeah.
historical ones especially.
I guess we could introduce the theme that this film shares with our second film. They're both sort of house figures prominently in both films,
Yeah,
and sort of dreams also,
yes.
the sort of intoxicating power of dreams embodied in a house feature
Yeah,
in both films. I think that will take us from one film into the other. Do you think that's correct?
I think so, and I think also as when we talk about performance as well, we can talk about the fact that both deal with men who um, kind of pursue new identities, or try and sort of strive beyond their own kind of their own personalities, and try to strive towards something else, and it ends tragically, badly.
Tragically. Well put.
Yes.
Very delicately put.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
there are
that's
a lot
true.
of themes about the losing oneself in someone else's sort of dreams and things like that. I think is
Yeah.
kind of something that runs through the two of them. I
Yeah.
think it's interesting. I don't
Definitely.
know, Jonathan, now because we've been doing this for quite a few months now, and I
Yeah.
think, is it possible that we could take any two films and put them together and
I
find some sort of connective tissue thematically between them? This is the
I
question that I wonder, I ponder.
I had the thought had occurred to me as well, because when we decided to do this as just random personal favourites, and then they were like so sort of such good fits, I just thought, is
Yeah.
is this? I mean, yeah, the
Well,
same
to
thought
be
occurred to
fair,
me.
there was a little bit of sort of because I mean, in terms of personal favorite, like I'm not really into like sort of saying, this is the best of all time and making
Yeah,
lists and ranking things and all that. Because I
yeah,
know a lot of people like to rank things and go, oh, this is number one and this is number
yeah,
eight and all this. I'm not really into that. I think, a great film is a great film. And
yeah,
you know, um, I don't really feel compelled to rank them. But when you kind of proposed your film first,
yeah,
and then I did sort of then think of a favorite film of mine that I
yeah,
thought might fit with
yeah.
that a little bit. So there was a little bit of calculation to a certain
Right,
extent.
yeah,
Um, but I do still wonder if it would be possible to randomly just pick two films and then find something that
yeah,
and I think we should hold that thought
yeah.
going
Perhaps
forward in the
try and break
future.
film swap by
Yes.
proposing apparently completely different films, only for them to be have surprising similarities once more.
Well, yeah, well, it has happened. I mean, I remember when we did sort of High Noon and 12 Angry Men, we
That's
found
true.
some thematic
Yeah,
similarities and things. And I think there's
yeah,
been a few other times. I think
no, definitely.
there might be a case to be made for that, which is all the
Yeah,
more sort of validates the film swap format, doesn't
it
it,
does
really?
very much, very much. Great
Uh,
format.
but anyway, so unless there was anything else you wanted to say about, specifically about Ugetsu, um,
No, I think I've said most of it. Yeah, it deserves its reputation as a classic of world and Japanese cinema. I think.
absolutely. And so we would definitely want to encourage you folks out there, if you've never seen it before, to go seek it out.
Yeah,
Which brings us to the question of how did you watch it, Jonathan?
I did. I watched it on the Masters of Cinema late Mizoguchi box set. So it has four discs, I think, and
Yeah,
each one has two films on it.
yes.
So
That's a beautiful box, isn't it? Beautiful
it
art, and
is.
I
Yeah.
do have it as well. I didn't use it to watch it this time because that actual is you can see if people who are watching the video version, you can see I'm surrounded by boxes and piles of things, and that set is actually at the bottom of a pile somewhere, and I didn't want to get it out. But as
Right.
it turns out, I picked up um, the Criterion Blu-ray,
Okay.
which the reason I picked this up because obviously I already had the Masters of Cinema, so I already had a copy.
Yeah.
But this actually comes with a documentary
Okay.
about Mizoguchi. It's called The Life of a Film Director, and it's a 1975 documentary by Kanito Shindo,
Okay.
sorry, who directed The Naked Island and Onibaba and
Okay.
films like that. And he made this documentary, so that's why I picked it up. And also, this was
Yeah.
a newer sort of 4K restoration that was done by
Okay.
Martin Scorsese's Film
Ah,
Foundation. So I ended up picking that up,
the Master
and that
Cinema one is a bit crackly, isn't it?
It's an older master. I mean, it's still
Yeah.
very good quality and stuff, but it isn't. It hasn't been like sort of restored. Like nowadays, they kind of scrub all the scratches and the pops out
Yeah.
and all that kind of stuff. So the Criterion one has a very good, stable, very good
Okay.
quality image, and it's very beautiful. But the Masters of Cinema disc is very good, and
Good, I
they've
enjoy
got
it.
some great. And the nice thing about the Masters of Cinema set is that, as you said, it came, they were kind of double features, weren't they? There was like
Yeah.
4 of them, and they had 2 films each
Yeah.
and then they put them together in a really beautiful set. But obviously, we're recording this in the summer of 2023. So obviously, if someone in the future listens to this, the situation may have changed somewhat. But right now, the film is also available on that Freevee thing that we've talked about that a few times here on the show. On Amazon Prime, they have a little sort of separate channel called Freevee, and Ugetsu is available on there at the minute. It's July 2023, so at the moment it's on there. I wouldn't personally recommend that be your first choice to watch it, because in Freevee they interrupt it with adverts, and so I wouldn't necessarily recommend. But obviously, if that's a way for you to watch it and you don't have another available option, that's there. The Masters of Cinema Blu-rays are out of print now. So I don't think people could get that set anymore anyway. I think they're sort of kind of come and gone. So I suspect if you wanted a physical copy of it, the Criterion edition is probably the way to go, really. But it is a beautiful set, and it actually comes with a little book as well that has the 3 stories that the film is based on.
Oh, really?
That they've printed in a nice little book, and then it's got obviously writings and things about the film. And and like I said, it comes with that extra documentary about Mizoguchi, and it's got some other contextual sort of supplements and things as well. So it's a really nice addition and definitely worth picking up. And this is definitely a film that you want to have on your shelf and have it at home.
I think so.
Because it's really great stuff.
Definitely.
So on that note, I think, folks, we're going to take a little break, a little water break. And listeners, we're going to go away, but it's only going to be for a few seconds. So you just stay right where you are, and we will literally be right back in just a minute to talk about our second film, Nicolas Roeg's Performance.
You can follow the Film Swap on social media. We're on Twitter and TikTok at Film Swap UK, on Instagram at Film Swap Media, and on YouTube at Film Swap_podcast, and at Facebook at Film Swap the podcast.
And we're back.
We're
back. We've had some beverage, and we've talked some film swap business, haven't we, Jonathan?
Yep.
We've had some conversation behind the scenes, discussions, and now we're back for you, and we're going to talk about one of the great classics of British cinema, a film that well, I don't know, Jonathan, what would you say?
The way I describe it, I have a good description of it.
Oh, okay.
I think.
Well, actually, it was you're the one who put this one forward. So I'm going to hand it over to you to tell us a little bit about Performance.
Well, Performance, I always describe it in one sort of sentence when people ask me about Performance. I could describe it as the British Easy Rider.
Okay, that's interesting.
Because it's basically it's the sort of the seminal hippie film from the 1960s, except I guess the big difference is, being a European film, they don't go out on the road, they just stay. It stays in one house, essentially. I guess that's my description of it. And it's got James Fox, who's a sort of gangster called
Yes.
Chaz, and essentially he falls foul of his sort of gangster bosses who want to get rid of him, and so he takes refuge in a house in Notting Hill that's sort of lived in by this chap called Turner, who's like a reclusive rock star, played by Mick Jagger, who's living with two women. Anita Pallenberg is one of them, and the
And
other one.
was this Mick Jagger's first foray into
I think it
acting?
was.
Is that
Yeah,
fair? Is that right? Is
I
that
think it
correct to
was.
say? I
Yeah,
think it is. Yeah.
exactly. And his two sort of girlfriends are Ferber, played by Anita Pallenberg, and Lucy, played by Michelle Breton, who's a French woman.
Yes.
And so James Fox turns up there, and he's from a completely different world. I mean, they're both sort of outsiders in a way. They sort of, but he comes from a completely different world, and there's a sort of massive culture clash, essentially.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, and the whole film is very 60s, very, very 60s. It's got lots of experimental sort of camera work and whatnot in it.
Yes, and the
And
editing and the
editing.
imagery, and it's got some which were quite controversial at the time. They seem pretty tame, really, by today's standards, but there's some saucy bits, and
There's some saucy bits as well, yes.
and some, quite shocking violence.
There's sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and violence.
Yeah, James Fox is he's like a proper nutter, isn't he, in this? He's
He's a
like,
proper nutter, yeah.
he's like this gangster with a real chip on his shoulder. He's kind
Yeah.
of like an enforcer or something, isn't he, for some sort of boss kind of, what would you call that guy? Like he's sort of like a kingpin or something of the kind of the
Yeah.
underworld in London. And he's a very funny character, isn't he? I don't know what that guy's name is. The guy who plays
Harry Flowers.
Yeah, he's just hilarious, isn't he? Just like everything he says, he talks like this, and he's sort of like, and he's making these little, I guess what he perceives as these little pearls of wisdom about life and his business interests and his observations on people's character and things, and he's very, very funny, very brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, there's loads of great sort of characters in it. Really, there's this sort of rock star. Chaz takes the room of this rock star. Sort of rock star is like a sort of a musician who's going off.
Just kind of like living as a recluse in this sort of apartment building, isn't he? I don't know. It's not clear, but does he actually own it, and he's just kind of renting a room out?
I've got a fefeeling he owns it.
Yeah,
I've got a feeling he's been big, and now he's a reclusive rock star. And this is like the first sort of cinematic sort of expression of the reclusive rock star motif.
Yeah.
I mean, there isn't one before that. He basically invents it. And since then there's been loads of films with reclusive rock stars in, I guess.
Indeed. There's been actual reclusive rock stars.
Sometimes, exactly. I mean, I went to see.
It kind of reminds me a bit of sort of, because around this period, wasn't it, when Miles Davis sort of, what was in about 75, he just sort of went into retirement for about 5-6 years, didn't he?
Oh, okay.
And apparently he just lived in his apartment, and people would come to him and stuff, but he just basically just stayed in his flat for 5 years, and kind of much like this Mick Jagger character in the film.
Oh, okay, yeah. I went to see Sing 2 with my children last weekend, and in that Bono is sort of in the film.
All right.
And he plays a reclusive rock star.
There you
basically, they have to try and sort of tempt out of retirement or sort of reclusiveness. And so I mean, anyway, that's one of the many things that sort of interesting about it, I guess.
Well, the film is almost, in a way, it's kind of, there's two parts to it, isn't there? There's sort of the first part of the film is kind of like a gangster film, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's about this James Fox character who's, and he's like a proper nutter, and he goes around
Yes.
sort of, beating people up and
Yeah.
things, who owe them money, or or they just want to muscle in on their business or whatever. So he goes
Yeah.
to intimidate them, and he's a
Yeah.
right proper nasty character. He quite
Yeah.
clearly relishes his job. He
Yeah.
enjoys sort of torturing people and being horrible and intimidating them, and he's
He's a
very.
sadist.
Yeah, and he's very you can just see any minute he's got this menace and this kind of coiled spring that any second he's just gonna sort of
Yeah.
pull out a knife and cut your head off or something, and he just has that real menace to him. And the first half of
Yeah.
the film kind of deals with him and his kind of fall from grace, if you will,
Yeah.
because he's such a hothead that some of the other characters describe him as a mad dog, don't they?
Yeah.
Who they have to end up putting down. So
That's it.
he basically he crosses a line with the boss, and then he has to kind of go into hiding. And at first, he's going to take off and uh, go and he's trying to get out of town, and he's going to go and try and find somewhere to hide. But then
Yep.
when he's sitting in a bus, is it the bus terminal or an airport?
Railway station.
Or railway station, okay.
Waterloo or Victoria
Whatever.
Station, one or the other.
Yeah, but it's a very run down, dilapidated looking kind of environment as well.
Well,
But,
London, so run down.
Yeah.
I mean, back then.
Grimy and sort of, everything just looks like it's caked with sort of soot and
Yeah,
everything. And
exactly.
it's quite
The locations
like
are brilliant.
that. Yeah, but he overhears while he's sitting in this train station. He overhears this chap talking to his mother about how he's left this flat because he didn't have the rent money. He was behind in his rent, and he basically bailed, and he's running off. And he basically overhears this conversation, and he goes, "Oh, I could go and I'm going to go and stay there. That sounds like a perfect hiding spot."
Yeah.
So he goes and he just basically finds this flat and shows up there and just says, "Oh, I'm a mate of that guy, and I'm here to take the room." And then we kind of go into this second half of the film, which is this tough gangster, and he's quite clearly very conservative and sort of straight laced in many ways. Homophobic and really aggressive, and he thinks all these artists are just sort of you know what I mean. He just sort of he just sneers at all this stuff and looks down on it as all this ridiculous thing. But then he shows up in this flat, and he kind of gets sucked into Mick Jagger's world, doesn't he? And these two women who live with him.
Yeah.
So it's quite interesting. There's a lot of, so as the film progresses, he's this tough, very masculine sort of alpha male kind of character. But as the film progresses, there's a lot of these lines that are crossed into sort of androgyny, and sort of there's scenes where they sort of, have implied sort of homoeroticism between him and Mick Jagger. And there's these kind of all these moments where he sort of his identity begins to merge with this rock star and this more free spirited sort of lifestyle and things.
Exactly.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, this film has, a lot, so you can talk about it.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on. They sort of threw everything at it.
That's right.
There
is even a kitchen sink, isn't there, at one point where the guy, when they've gone and trashed some guy's betting thing, and he brings out a sink.
Yeah.
So there is quite literally everything and a kitchen sink in this film.
Yeah, everything and the kitchen sink, exactly. And then there's the kitchen in this house in Notting Hill, which is a great kitchen as well. Sort of, one of the sort of the enjoyable bits about the film is the interior decoration of Mick Jagger's house, which is done by this chap Christopher Gibbs, who was I think he was a genuine sort of interior designer for the Stars in the 60s, I think. and he designed Brian Jones's flat apparently. And anyway, they got him designing the look of this place, but that itself had been dreamt up by Donald Cammell. I guess one of the things about the film, it's got two directors. It's got Nick Roeg and Donald Cammell. So you got sort of twice as many ideas, I guess, basically.
Yeah. Well, what was it? He was the writer, wasn't he? And he was kind of the co-director, and Nicolas Roeg was. Well, he was like was he an editor or he was a cinematographer? And this was kind of his first foray into making a film. Yeah. And so he brought all of that sort of experience, and like you say, there's this kaleidoscope of different kind of images and experimental kind of editing and sort of bits at times when the exposures and the lenses and everything are all kind of chopping and changing, and the cuts are quite jumpy from these to juxtapose these different images and things, and it's quite it kind of keeps coming at you all the time, doesn't it, with all this
very much does.
Yeah
and the sort of I guess the sound design is sort of experimental as well. You've got sort of panning and all sorts of things that are interesting and strange, and sort of odd sound effects in there, and random bits of other films, sort of, and everything in it. And well, one of the interesting things is that this is where the name of my internet handle came from, Ecstatic Gaucho, because there's one of the themes in it is this Mick Jagger's character reads from this book, or a short story called El Sur, or The South, by Jorge Luis Borges, the Argentinian writer. And in it, he talks about the old ecstatic gaucho. And earlier on in the book, one of the gangsters is seen sitting in the back of the car reading this sort of collected sort of stories of Borges, and then later on, the rock star's reading it too. And in that story, it's funnily enough, it's about a man who sort of gets knocked on the head and has a sort of strange, and goes into hospital and has a strange dream. It's all about dreams and fate and sort of beating your, your end and all these sort of things as well. Sort of similar themes that the film has. And then right at the end, you see a photograph of Borges, well, without giving too much away. And that's another theme. Anyway, the ecstatic gaucho, it sort of leapt out at me when I heard that. I thought, I'm going to use that. And so now I've had that as my sort of, now it's my Twitter handle, but it's my website and all this sort of stuff. It's been around for 20 odd years.
Yeah, and listeners should seek out Jonathan's blog and things like that. Is it still? I mean, you've been doing it for years.
I need to get it up again. Actually,
has it been a bit inactive for a couple of years?
It's been inactive. Yeah. I put my portfolio on there, but I think basically it's been hacked. So I do own it still, but I've got to get it sort of going again.
Oh, okay. Well,
yeah. But yeah, it's the music's great because it's got sort of Rolling Stones in it, but it also has some music. Old what's his name? The Raikuda plays on it too.
Yeah. There's a few people I noticed on the credits that there was a bit of a jamboree of different. Apparently, originally it was meant to be the Rolling Stones who were going to do the soundtrack for the film,
right?
But I guess Mick Jagger and Keith Richards at the time were they weren't getting on, or they were sort of fighting over. I think one of the women who's in the film was Keith Richards' girlfriend at the time.
Yeah.
So there was he felt a bit threatened by the fact that Mick Jagger was making this film with her or something. And so the relations were strained at the time. So it didn't work out for the Rolling Stones to do the music for the film. But there is one number where Mick Jagger sings, isn't there? What's it called?
A Memo for Turner.
Memo for Turner.
I think.
And it's a cool little bit. I mean, I've always,
Yeah.
whenever I've seen the film, I've always felt, I don't know. I mean, I suppose if you, at the time, if you're going to have Mick Jagger in a film, you want to get him to sing, don't you? Because
He had to sing.
that was kind of like, you know, I would imagine that Warner Brothers was thinking they were going to get like a Rolling Stones movie and that there was going to be sort of singing and dancing about and stuff in it. And I think they were a little bit taken aback by what they actually got when they saw the film. They were kind of like, "Oh my God, what is this? This isn't, you know,
Yeah,
this
I think
isn't what I was expecting."
yes, there was. They were very upset or dismayed, I think, by the finished product. One thing I would say that if you're interested in the film, there's this great little book here.
Oh, okay.
It's called Performance, published by Bloomsbury and written by Mick Brown.
Okay.
It's a sort of A to Z. It's part of a series. It came out like 24 years ago, I guess. It came out published, and there's six different books on different sort of classic films: Blue Velvet, Jaws, and Performance. And it's a sort of A to Z of the film, and it gives you all the information you could possibly need on the film, and it's beautifully written as well. Really, I was reading a bit of it just now before we started chatting, and it's great. It's got some
brilliant.
great,
I might look it up because it's such a fascinating film, and like you say, there's so much in there. Like every time you watch it, you can pick up. It's one of those films that you can watch it at a different time, and then have a completely different experience and pick up on completely different things, and that's just part of the amazing things about it. Is just like this sort of. You kind of bring yourself to a little bit each time you watch it. And I could swear even because I watched it last night on I have the Warner Brothers Blu-ray. And that's what I watched. But the last time I watched this wasn't that long ago. It was maybe 2-3 years ago.
Okay.
Back when they had a streaming service called Filmstruck, which was kind of part of Time Warner. And it only lasted for about a year, but it was sort of, it was a really good streaming service. It was a shame that it kind of went under because they had a lot of really great stuff on there. Right. And I remember watching Performance, and I could swear because it wasn't that long ago since I've watched it last, that this version of the film that's on this disc wasn't the same as the one I saw a couple of years ago. Now, that could just be because, I'm getting older. Maybe my memory is not serving me correctly, but I could swear there was bits in this that I don't remember being in it the last time I watched it, or I just don't remember them, or it just felt a little bit like it was a slightly different sort of cut of the film.
Yeah.
And when I was reading this morning the Wikipedia page, just to sort of prime my head for talking about the film, it does say that when it came out, Warner Brothers was quite reluctant to release it. It took a couple of years before it finally came out, and in America, they dubbed over the voices and changed it. And this isn't the first time we've talked about this happening. I think we talked about the Long Good Friday. They did something similar, that when they released it in America, they decided that the Cockney accents and stuff, that people might struggle with it. So they re-recorded some of the voices and they made other changes and edits. And what was interesting is that they said that at a certain point, there were multiple different versions of the film that were in circulation. So kind of depending on when you saw it and where you saw it, it would be a sort of a different version of the film. And it was quite, because I remember, I'm old enough to remember that this film was, it wasn't the kind of thing they showed on TV and things, but it was very much one of those kind of midnight films that they used to show in sort of repertory cinemas and late at night at sort of midnight screenings and things. So you had to sort of go out to see it. It wasn't something that you could readily sort of see at home. But it is quite interesting to read about, because that's kind of the minutiae that sort of film collectors and fans kind of like to get into, is the different alternate cuts and different versions of films. So it's quite interesting to read about that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I don't know how definitive the version on here is. But it's a good Blu-ray. It's a very beautiful
Yep.
transfer, and it's
Yep.
it doesn't have a lot of sort of supplementary stuff on it,
No.
just some sort of little featurettes and things.
Yeah.
But I'm convinced that what I watched last night wasn't the same
Okay.
as what I've seen previously.
Yeah. Well, there was some bits that one bit that when I watched it again on Friday night, 2 nights ago, and there's this short scene where in one of the rooms in this house in London, there's an enormous pile of logs. Because the Mick Jagger's character has a sort of open fire, so we can have a log fire, but yeah, there's this just massive pile of logs in this sort of empty room, just very weird. I guess it sort of makes sense in a way, but it just was quite strange as well. And it's got another thing actually that I wanted to mention is the dialogue. It's got some absolutely brilliant lines. So when the gangster turns up in this house, he goes, "I need a bohemian atmosphere,"
Yes.
which is a sort of immortal line, I think. So lots of these lines. There's a great song, E equals MC squared by Big Audio Dynamite, which was Mick Jones of the Clash, his band after the end of the Clash, and it's basically all about Nick Roeg's films. And but it also, as the sort of lyrics talk about Nick Roeg films, but it also has sort of samples from some of the films, and it has, I think, I need a bohemian atmosphere in the background, and I mean, some of the film, that's one of the funny things. I guess is it sort of bad because or is it just intentionally like I guess it's intentionally sort of like that because
I've always taken it that way. I mean,
I think so.
there are always, I mean, I love a good bad film, like a so bad they're good kind of film. I'm quite sure at some point we'll probably do a show about those kind of things. But I don't think that this film is. I think there's a lot of like the humor and stuff is intentional. A lot of the dialogue and stuff, is very much.
Some of the acting seems ropey, but I'm sure it's intentional. I mean, even the casting of James Fox as a gangster is a very not working class actor. The interesting thing about James Fox, he's very much cast against type there in this film, and I think that this is sort of slightly what Nick Roeg liked doing. He liked doing weird. He made weird casting decisions, and especially getting actors in lots of musicians in lots of his films.
Yeah, but he's brilliant though, isn't he? Like he is like a proper psycho gang, and he's brilliant in the film.
Yeah.
Like just absolutely mesmerizing, and just like I say, he's just like this tightly, like you just like he's very menacing and intimidating, but very funny too. Like you say, he's got like lots of really great little lines and bits of dialogue.
Yeah,
and he's absolutely brilliant.
He's very funny. Another thing that struck me watching it, that Mick made me think of Russell Brand somehow. Russell Brand, the comedian and sort of podcast guy. And I sort of wondered, but I guess quite a bit of Russell Brand's sort of image is sort of slightly cribbed off Mick at his sort of in his 60s pomp.
Yeah, I suppose you could probably slot his current persona. You could probably slot him right into this film, and he'd probably fit right in. Absolutely.
They're going to make a remake of it.
Oh, please don't. Anyone who's out there who's going, "Hey, what a great idea!" That's not a great idea.
Yeah, another great line. I guess this is one of the things I was thinking. Some of it, I like the line. He says, "I like a bit of a cavort," which was silly but funny. I mean, it's funny and it's intentionally funny. And then I guess the other bit that at the time probably made was, the hippies were going, oh yeah, that's great. The performance that achieves madness is a truly great performance.
Mm.
And now seems maybe a little bit dated and sort of silly,
Mm.
just because I don't know. It's just quite a sort of 60s thing, really. But
Yeah. And how
yeah,
do you feel? I mean, obviously, we don't want to. I don't know if it'd be possible to spoil the ending for someone who's never seen this before, but do you. How would you interpret that ending in terms of the. Um, do you know what I'm saying? Without trying to give the game away for someone who possibly hasn't seen the film before, but do you think that's an effective ending? And did you think
yeah.
that as a payoff, how do you think
I thought
that
it
worked?
was all right, yeah, because you've got this sort of strange thing about their identities merging,
Hmm.
and at the end, you're not really sure who's what and who's going where and what's happening really,
Yeah.
and it's sort of left open. And I like that quality, that sort of open quality of the film, and I think that works well. And yeah, I don't mind the ending. I
Hmm.
think it's good. Yeah.
No, I
What,
agree. I mean, I love it. I love this film, but I was just curious to see what you'd say.
yeah, no, I'm not a not a problem with that.
Because
I
I
don't have
think,
a
like I
problem.
said, I think this film, you could, every time you watch it, you can sort of interpret it or pick different things up in it and stuff. And I think it's
Yes,
terrific.
yeah,
And
and one of the things I guess I think I mentioned earlier that I really like is all these London locations,
mm,
because especially at the beginning, it's sort of a lot of it's filmed
which
outside.
train station is that he goes into? Wandsworth?
Yeah,
And
Wandsworth
it
Station.
literally looks like it's just like this abandoned sort of,
Yeah,
wasteland, that like this industrial sort of wasteland kind of war zone that he's walking into. But there's a
yeah,
big sign that says Wandsworth Station on it. And it's just
yeah.
like, is that what that used to look like? It's like, oh my God. It looks like they
Well,
need to sandblast it and sort of give it a good
well, a
hosing.
lot of London was, it's. I mean, I think the Clean Air Act came in 1958 or something like that.
Mm,
So until then, it was the pea supers and everything was black with this sort of smoke from coal fires.
yeah,
And
God.
then this was only 10 years later that they filmed it. So I mean, I think they started cleaning up London in the sort of 80s when they started sandblasting everything.
Uh,
And I sort of vaguely remember, yeah, sort of seeing these buildings which are dark, and suddenly they're all light and they look better. Like,
yeah, yeah.
and so you can see the pre-sandblasted London, which is really
Well,
interesting, and
that's
Notting
part of
Hill, which
the
is
fun of watching old films, though, isn't it? Is to see,
yeah,
because the films that were shot on location. I mean, I think we've talked about this before in other episodes, and specifically when we talked about Long Good Friday, we talked a bit about this. But the fact that these films are also, in terms of just the fact that they documented
mm,
on film
yeah,
these things, that these worlds that aren't there anymore, these
exactly,
streets and these
yeah,
cities and these landscapes and things that maybe have changed completely in the decades since. But
yeah,
these films serve as a record
yeah,
of that, of the those times. Even though it's a
definitely,
fictional film, there is some reality there as well, isn't there,
it's very
in the
much.
background?
And Notting Hill, where the sort of a lot of it's set, is completely different to Notting Hill
Yeah.
now. It's sort of, there's no grass on the square in the middle of this sort of, uh, uh, you know, in the middle, well, where now I'm sure there's a lovely garden and a playground and stuff like this, and there's sort of rubbish everywhere, and everybody's got holes in their clothes, and it's a very different world, and
Indeed.
utterly fascinating for it. Yeah, none of the houses have been painted for sort of since the 30s. It looks like, and
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely amazing.
Yeah. It is. It's really something. Really
Yeah,
something.
and yeah, and I guess in this film, the one thing I would say the similarities of old Chaz goes into this sort of dream, a little bit like the character in Ugetsu.
Yeah,
But this dream, in Ugetsu, the dream is a bad dream.
yeah.
And in this dream, this dream, I guess being a hippie film, the dreams have a positive sort of thing to tell us.
Mm,
And here it's sort of working its sort of dreamy magic on him and improving him in the end in
mm.
some ways. And the house is a sort of this chamber of the dreamings, and yeah, um, and I guess you've got the Lady Wakasa. There's two Lady Wakasas, maybe or three Lady Wakasas if you
Mm.
include Mick.
Yeah,
Yeah, but it is funny that it does have these similarities.
yeah, definitely. It is, yeah, like that bit in Ugetsu. We didn't really talk about that. Like, there's that one bit when he's at the shop buying, I don't know, just various sort of cloth and various things to take back to the house, and he goes into this sort of dream of his wife being there with him and picking out, things to make a kimono out of and stuff like that. And then it's just
Mm,
this little where he goes into this little dream where he remembers his, his past and the life
yeah,
that he once had, and just trying to make her happy, and the things that he lost sight of. It's really beautiful. But you're right, here they have much more of a, James Fox is letting himself go into this, because we're at first where he's very resistant to
yeah.
this sort of hippie, sort of bohemian sort of vibe. But once he's had the mushrooms and he goes into this thing, he kind of succumbs to it, doesn't he?
He
Sort of
does.
embraces it in a sense.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
it's wonderful, those bit when his old gang guys catch up with him, and they see him and he's got the wig on and the lipstick, and
yeah.
and that's a really brilliant moment. And and he doesn't seem to care, which is really funny. Like, he's not embarrassed or anything about it. He
Yeah,
just he's like, yeah, whatever. So it's brilliant, brilliant
yeah,
film.
yeah. It is really, really good, and a
So
lot to
can
get out of it.
you what would you have to say
Yeah,
about because just this week, when we're
yep.
recording, it was just this week that Mick Jagger celebrated his 80th birthday.
Was it?
It's
My goodness.
extraordinary.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
Still working too, isn't he? Do they still go out touring and stuff? Is he still like sort
Yeah,
of
pretty much. Yeah, I
active?
think so. Yeah,
That's amazing. That's
yeah,
absolutely amazing.
yeah,
But what would you say? I mean, this was his first film, and he did do a few other films, didn't he? He
yep,
did that sort of Ned Kelly
yep.
and one or two other things. Apparently, he was originally supposed to be in Fitzcarraldo, wasn't he? Werner
Oh, was
Herzog's
he?
Fitzcarraldo. It's always that scene of Herzog has pulled it out several times in that documentary made about Klaus Kinski
Oh,
and a
yeah.
couple other things. He uses that
My
scene
beautiful fiend.
with My Best Fiend, which is a
My
brilliant
best
film.
fiend. That's it.
But there's a bit of footage that he shows because originally it was Jason Robards and Mick Jagger who were going to be starring in Fitzcarraldo,
Oh, right.
and
My
then
goodness.
because the production ran into some problems, they ended up Mick Jagger left because he had to go on tour or something.
Oh,
He had other
okay.
commitments with the Rolling Stones.
Yep.
Um, but anyway, he's not done a huge number of films, has he?
No.
He's kind of
No.
like he kind of, I would say, he's a bit like David Bowie in that he dabbled in acting a little bit. He
Yep.
sort of did the odd film here and there, but he
Yep.
didn't really have a really
No.
big, like we were talking about Chris Christopherson a few episodes ago about
Yeah.
Heaven's Gate, but he was someone who was initially a pop singer, like a country and
Yep.
western sort of star, and then he got into film acting, and he had
Yep.
up until Heaven's Gate, he had quite a substantial career and made a lot of
Yeah.
films, and was, you know, um, really got into the acting as a career. Whereas
Yep.
Mick Jagger, he only just did a few films. In your opinion,
Yep.
what do you think of Mick Jagger as an actor?
In this film, it's perfect.
Mm.
I think that's the thing about Nick Roeg. He liked using sort of musicians in his films. So later on, The Man Who Fell to Earth has David Bowie, and then there's Bad Timing, which has Art Garfunkel as well. And all three films are fine. I mean, you think, musicians and actors, they're not the same. Perhaps musicians shouldn't be in these films. People criticise it at least, but they're in these films. He's got the perfect person for that role, and it doesn't matter at all. And Mick Jagger is not really. I guess he's playing Mick Jagger in a way, but that's fine because that's what you need. That's what the film needs.
He definitely works really well in this, doesn't he? I mean, he fits right in. He's
Absolutely
kind of perfect.
Yeah.
And I just was curious because, like I say, I'm not aware of, aside from Ned Kelly and I don't know, he did some sort of weird science fiction film in the 80s as well, which was really bad, but I can't remember what it was called. I think probably everyone's just tried to forget about it. I can't remember what it was.
Yeah.
But like, he didn't really have a substantial film career, did he, in the end?
No.
I don't know if that was by choice or what, or he just, I guess Rolling Stones probably took a lot of his energy and his time.
I think, I think so. And it was there's this Bob Dylan film, which I think Bob Dylan wrote, which has Rupert Everett in it. It was made in the 80s. And it's sort of awful in a way, but it's also perfect. And it's sort of, because it's not really it's sort of, I don't know, it works perfectly. So, and I would say the same thing here with Mick Jagger. He's fine in it.
Yeah, no, I agree. He works really well in this. Okay. Is there anything else you wanted to say about it? Because we're moving on.
No, I think that's it.
Yeah.
That's it. I bought that same Blu-ray as you, and it's good. It's got one sort of 20 or 25 minute documentary on it. Pretty much, that's the only extra. Well, it does have a couple of other sort of smaller, less significant things.
It's got a cool performance. Is one of the coolest trailers. I remember that. Like, I remember seeing that at, like, they used to show it sometimes in some of the repertory theaters in Toronto and stuff. They used to sometimes get the trailer for performance and show it before the main feature and stuff. And I used to always think it was a really cool trailer, even before I'd seen the film.
Right,
The trailer, it was just really cool. Those sort of, the bullet going into the head.
Yeah.
And the, all those kind of, it's quite really sort of, it makes you kind of go, man, this looks trippy. I want to see this. What is it?
Definitely.
What's this all about?
It is. The Bob Dylan film is called Hearts of Fire.
Oh, yeah. I do remember it. I remember it, yeah.
Yeah. And I thought Bob Dylan wrote it. He didn't.
Yeah, I'm not sure that one shows up on the Sight and Sound list, does it?
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of dreadful, but I really enjoyed it when I saw it.
Yeah. I mean, I could probably look up the name of the... I don't know, it wouldn't make for great podcast listening for me to be looking around on the internet to work out what the name of that Mick Jagger film was that he was in the 80s, science fiction film. I can't remember what it was called. It was really dreadful. I remember. Although, I don't know, maybe it's ripe for a reappraisal, perhaps.
It's called Free Jack.
Free Jack, that's
1992.
it. Yes. 1992, all right.
Yeah.
Okay, so it wasn't even in the 80s, it was later.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the less said about that, the better. We'll just... But anyway, I don't know. Well, we shouldn't, because, for every... there'll be a fan out there. There'll be someone out there who loves Free Jack and thinks it's brilliant. And, and by all means, reach out to us. Send us an email. Or come talk to us. We'd love to hear from you. If there's a Free Jack fan out there,
absolutely,
by all means, come and talk to us, because we'd love to have a conversation with you about that. because maybe it's time. I haven't seen it, obviously, since it was new. Those many years ago. What'd you say, 92? So that's 30 years ago.
Perhaps you've got to do Freejack versus Hearts of Fire.
Right. Let's put that on the docket, Jonathan, because I think you might be onto something. If we can even get hold of them, I mean, who knows?
Well, that's true. Very good point.
Because it's not easy to get hold of things nowadays, and especially
it's not.
Bob Dylan films. Because Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid, can you even watch that? I've got the soundtrack, but I don't think I've ever had a chance to watch it. Is it available somehow?
No idea.
Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah.
I've never seen it. I'd be curious to see it.
I have seen it.
Have you? And is it good? Is it all right?
It's good, yeah. It's Sam Peckinpah film.
Yeah. But I've never had a chance to see it before.
He made good films generally, as a rule.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think, we've gone off on a little bit of a tangent.
We have.
But that's okay, because we're talking about film, so that's cool.
Yeah.
All right, well, folks, definitely, if you get a chance, check out Performance. But definitely, folks, if you've never seen it, go and check it out, because it's brilliant. And the same goes for Ugetsu. If you should go and seek that out. It's probably slightly harder to get hold of, I think, but it, like I said, as of right now, it's available on Freevee. If you have Amazon Prime, it's on there and it's free. But you are going to get sort of dog food commercials interrupting it every sort of half an hour or something, which is very annoying. And deeply offensive, but there you are.
I think it's on Apple TV.
Oh, well, there you go.
Yeah.
Oh, brilliant. Okay. Is that like as a rental?
Rental.
Oh, brilliant. Okay. So go, folks, if you don't want to buy a Blu-ray, then that would be your next best option, is to try and see it without ad breaks and things, because it's definitely a film that is not well served by being interrupted too much. So, okay, well, on that note, folks, we are going to say goodbye. Thank you very much for listening, and we hope you enjoyed the conversation, and we hope you'll go and check out these great films. We'll be back in a couple of weeks. We do have some really great guests lined up, so in the meantime, don't forget to go and check out our YouTube page and watch out for our fabulous, funky, fantastic film swap factoids. And if I could have thought of any more F words, I would have.
That's a lot of Fs there.
Yes.
Very good.
But anyway, but by all means, go and check it out. Jonathan will be on screen there telling you some interesting little facts about some of the films that we talk about here on the show. And sometimes maybe about other films too. Who knows? Who knows? But whatever it is, it'll be funky, factual, and filmy.
At least those three Fs.
Yes.
Maybe more.
At the end, more besides, yes. So anyway, look out for them, and look out for other surprises coming your way soon. I know I keep saying that, but I really do mean it. There are some plans in the works that will be coming over the next couple of months. So by all means, now's the time to follow or subscribe, depending on how you find us, because there are some cool things coming your way from the Film Swap team. So, on that note, folks, thank you for tuning in, and we will see you in a couple of weeks. So take care until then, and watch lots of cool films.
Cool. Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Oh, the things these nerdy middle-aged men get up to.